Miami's season is over after a humiliating blowout loss that showed exactly how far this team is from actually being competitive. We look back at Game 4, the Heat's disappointing season, and what's next on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. For daily content on the Heat, click that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you are following us on your podcast app. And no, we are not going away, even though it is the offseason, still going strong 5 days a week. This episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Got a ton to get to today. We're going to talk about whether or not this season should be considered a failure for the Heat and some of the biggest mistakes the Heat made this season before looking ahead to the offseason with a couple of listener questions. We are recording this Monday night after the Heat got blown out, embarrassed by the Cleveland Cavaliers on their home floor. This game was never close. The first play of the game was a turnover. Davion Mitchell tries to throw a pass to Khalil Ware. Simple pass. Jarrett Allen steals it, scores on the other end. The Cavs start the game on a 12-3 run, never looked back. David, I don't know what point was worse. Was it when they were down 30-8? When they were down 43-17? When they were down 72-33 at halftime? Maybe it was 82-38 in the third quarter. The Cavs win this game by 55 points. And here's one more stat for you. The Cavaliers outscored the Heat by 122 points in this series. It is the most lopsided playoff series in NBA history. David, just an awful effort and an awful way to end the season. What stood out to you?
Nothing. It was all a blur. It really was. We talked about what we were hoping for in Game 4, and this was the exact opposite of that. It was that play that you just described, almost in an eerie, incredible sense that you rarely see this in like an NBA game or an NBA, specifically in an NBA playoff game. It seemed like it set the tone so completely, and it was as close to the straw that broke the camel's back as I've ever seen in decades of watching NBA basketball. To follow up that Jarrett Allen steal and breakaway dunk, and then two more turnovers by Davion after that within a span of a minute and a half, that's it. They were completely broken. And from that point forward, it didn't matter if they were down by 2 or 200. It was nothing. They wouldn't have competed. They were not competing. They were done. It felt like the weight of the season. It's not to play psychiatrist or everything like that. And I don't know how much the players themselves will cop to this sort of thing, but it was so apparent that as soon as Jarrett Allen made that play and Davion followed it up with those crucial turnovers at a point where they were trying to see if maybe we can muster something, that's it. It was over. And you have to give credit to Cleveland too. This isn't just Miami falling apart. This is Cleveland saying, "Oh, you're going to fall apart, all right, because we're going to beat you until you fall apart." And Cleveland is just too good. They were much, much better than Miami's competitive spirit in games 1 and 2 made it seem. Like they were just dominant in ways that I hadn't seen. They got better as the series progressed. They were incredible. And Miami was just clearly so exhausted by the end of Game 3, and then to start off Game 4 in that way. It was, if they had gone off maybe to like a 15-0 start, just for hypothetical sake, maybe they would have been like, okay, we can do this. We can compete. But you're down there. You're down 3-0. And again, history will tell you that you're not going to win this series no matter what. You want to be able to compete, and then you just start getting beat and play after play, and you can't seem to get anything going offensively. And defensively, they're just dominating you and taking cookies from you and just making sure that you can't even get into a normal set. They're just treating you like a child out there. And it was so clear that by that point, then Miami was just like, forget it. What's the point? Like, what are we going to do? We're going to try again. We're going to go all out and compete and bust our ass just so we could be down 20. It was so far from the possibility of even winning one game, much less winning the series, that at some point you're just like, you know what, forget it. And I kind of understand it. Fans don't want to hear that. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of disappointment among Heat fans after what's been a very disappointing season. But that's what it was. It just was a complete and total dismantling on a huge level that I did not expect in the series, and certainly not in Game 4.
Erik Spoelstra even called their own confidence coming off the play-in tournament going into this game irrational a couple of different times in his post-game press conference. And that has been the definition of the Miami Heat. They've always been irrationally confident, and we've seen it work, right? If any organization gets to be irrationally conversation, it usually is this one. And that wasn't the case in this game. And it ended up being irrational. I think it's the perfect word by Spo, because it's one thing to beat the Hawks, dude. It's another thing to beat this amazing Cavaliers team that won almost 70 games. And they're a great team. And you said it. They got better. That said, I know we can understand where it comes from, but this was embarrassing. This was embarrassing to do this in front of your fans. I understand everything that this team has gone through. I understand that the Cavs are better. I understand that they had no chance of winning this series, but there is no excuse for what I saw in that building tonight. For the fans who have stuck around after the Jimmy Butler trade, for the fans that went to this game and brought their own white t-shirts that were not supplied during the whiteout, for the guy I saw buying an Andrew Wiggins Miami Vice jersey, for the fans who tried to egg on this team with "let's go Heat" chants in the first quarter, this was the antithesis of everything that this Heat team stands for. The body language could be described at best as indifferent.
Yeah.
The turnovers, poor defense, the lack of execution. I guarantee you somewhere Udonis Haslem was screaming at his television and was ashamed at this effort. And I can tell you that Heat staffers at the game were genuinely confused by the effort that they saw from the team. And there's no excuses for that. And the Heat better not have Heat culture jerseys for next year, because they do not deserve it. It's the sort of thing, honestly, this effort, these last two games, that's the sort of thing that would get coaches and front office personnel fired in most organizations. And the Heat won't, and I'm not saying that they should do that, but I'm just telling you, changes on this roster and in the organization need to be made. Because running it back at this point would be malpractice. 2 straight years bounced in the first round. And outside of one crazy game 2 where you made 1 million three-pointers against Boston last year, wiped off the floor by clearly superior competition. And there's nothing that would have changes the results of those games or of those series. This team is looking up not only at Boston, but now clearly also Cleveland. They're looking up at Indiana. They're looking up at the Knicks. Running it back would be malpractice, and changes have to be made. And I'm not just talking about the roster. I'm not saying fire Spo or fire Pat or retire Pat or whatever, but everything needs to be closely looked at this summer, from front office personnel, coaching staff, the roster, obviously, and and certainly foremost. But this thing is broken. It's not working anymore. Changes have to be made this summer. There is no excuse for anything else.
It feels like you're overstating things, but you're not. Like, as much as I want to present an argument against it, you can't. This is 2 years in a row where you're a fluke game away from being 8-0 in the 0-8 in the playoffs. And yeah, you could point to last year, Jimmy Butler, and there were extenuating circumstances of this year, but the talent disparity, and you could say what you accomplished over the 5 previous seasons before that was all basically due to Jimmy Butler and the power of his belief and perseverance, and that he is a gamer, that he does rise to the challenge, and that you don't have anybody on the roster who comes close to being able to emulate that. And so massive changes should be made. I still have to say, well, I don't have to. My personal feeling is that the front office should get some leeway considering their success. Like, we do take it for granted, not media members, but I think as fans, there is a level of assuming that we should be in title contention every year. And that's just not realistic. It just doesn't happen. And this team has been better than expected. And whether that was because of Pat Riley or because of Dwayne Wade or because of whatever, the effect in the NBA. So I think this team will look at making things different and changing things around, but I don't think it's going to be the kind of wide sweeping changes that a lot of fans clamor for. It's not going to be firing the whole coaching staff. It's not going to be firing.
And nor should it be. Right? To your point, they don't deserve to be Doc Rivers. They don't deserve that. They deserve to try to fix it. They have earned that right. But they can't do what they've done the last 2 off seasons and just say, hey, let's get healthy. Let's get a training camp. We can tweak some things around the edges, tighten some screws, and come back and do it. No. And it's not just because of the Jimmy Butler trade, right? This team was out-talented with Jimmy Butler.
Yes.
They are severely out-talented now without Jimmy Butler. And so something has to give. There is a ton to get into. We're going to talk about whether this season should be considered a failure in general and some of the biggest mistakes the Heat made that led to this point. We're going to talk about that now, Locked on Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Maybe spend it on Andrew Wiggins jerseys. Who knows? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. And believe me, once you start using Monarch, you realize just how much money you're spending on things that maybe you shouldn't, whether it's food delivery or more. And you can start budgeting smarter and save more than ever. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com and you get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONBA, and you get half off your first year. Thank you so much, Monarch Money, and we'll be right back.
David, zooming out, we're trying to wash the taste out of this loss out of our mouths here. Was this season a failure, considering all the factors and, brief synopsis, I suppose, of the season? You're eliminated in the first round by the Celtics. Offseason, nothing really changes. Everything happens between Pat Riley and Jimmy Butler. You enter this season, and it was okay, but then obviously the Jimmy Butler thing happens, and that kind of throws a huge wrench in everything starting at the beginning of January. But then there's the 10-game losing streak, but the team goes into the play-in tournament, first ever 10 seed to advance through the play-in, get to the first round of the playoffs. They earn the right to play the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round, and then they lose in 4 games. So all the factors considered, was this season a failure, David?
Absolutely. All that matters is results. You cannot pick and choose when to use context in your favor, because no one cares about the context of being a play-in team and then going all the way to the NBA Finals, because what happened? You went all the way to the NBA Finals. And yes, there is some historical precedents being set in that. But to look at the lack of accomplishments over the last 2 years, the fact that this season, and undoubtedly it was challenging, emotionally exhausting, trying, whatever verb you want to use for it or adjective that you could think of describing it, it certainly fits. And yet, when you look at what this team failed to accomplish and what they didn't do, which was to look competitive at a very basic NBA level in the playoffs, then yes, it's a failure. You acquired certain players in exchange for Jimmy Butler. You were going to take a hit no matter what, because Jimmy was and remains a good player. That you don't want to pay him $60 million a year, I think still makes a lot of sense. But yet, there's no denying that he's a very good player. But when you look at what you get in return, you're thinking you can plug in certain holes and maybe be competitive, and yet you weren't. So it doesn't matter how exhausting it was, because what you did was get swept, and swept badly, humiliatingly swept in the playoffs for basically a second consecutive year. And so now you have to look at everybody on this roster and assess whether or not they are a core piece that you could include in your future? And I know that's going to be a conversation that we'll get into and branch off into in many future episodes. But the reality is you have to take a very cold, hard, and emotionless look at what this team was able to, how they failed in spectacular manner, and realize you ain't it. You ain't the team that you were the last couple seasons. You aren't the team that took advantage of the Orlando bubble and those circumstances to plow ahead and win despite everything that was going on around you. You aren't the team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals, and you aren't the team that went to the NBA Finals. You're a team that really stinks and cannot win against much better opponents.
Stinks seems harsh. They were in the playoffs. I mean, they're not the Wizards.
Come on.
But
they were losing a sub 500 team that beat.
No, they're no good. You're right. No, to your point, they're no good. Is this season a failure? Yeah. You thought this was going to be the last dance with Jimmy Butler, and it wasn't. You misjudged it. You misjudged Jimmy. You thought last year was a fluke because of his injury and the play-in. Maybe you thought you could recreate the magic of 2023. Everything was misjudged. The roster was, Jimmy was, everything was misjudged. And while the rest of the East got better, you got worse. And then you let go of the rope in the end, and you played without any pride. All of that is an organizational failure. And there should be consequences. And I don't know what those consequences are or what they should be, but something needs to give. You all failed. This was an organizational failure from top to bottom. You completely misjudged your own situation where everybody in the league saw exactly what the writing on the wall was, and you misjudged it. Your hubris. I think that this team fell in love with that 2023 run and thought that those few playoff series was more representative of what this team was in 2023 than what it actually had been over the last couple of years, which was basically a 500 basketball team that backed itself into the playoffs for 2 straight years, and then again this season without Jimmy Butler. Like, that's what this team has been. So I would argue from the very beginning it's been a failure, but it was certainly a failure. Now, I would also argue that maybe this season was really done and over in January.
Yes.
When Jimmy Butler walked into the press conference on January 2nd after a passive performance against the Indiana Pacers and said, I can't find joy, and I don't think I can find joy here in Miami on the basketball court. And really, that's when the entire season became about something other than basketball. Yeah. And it became about the Jimmy Butler distraction. And the Heat, an organization that has done such a good job of insulating themselves from distractions over the years, self-created or otherwise, by the way, that they insulate themselves over that, they failed to do it that time. And they were forced to trade Jimmy Butler. And this season became about trading Jimmy Butler. It became not about basketball. And that is, again, the antithesis of what the Miami Heat are as an organization. They are about the basketball, and they this season weren't about the basketball. And that became abundantly clear in this playoff series, where this team that always had fight and that would do everything it took, maybe not to always win, because you can't just try hard to a championship. That doesn't happen in the NBA.
Right.
But you could try hard not to get embarrassed.
Yeah.
And they got embarrassed in this one. So let's move on real quick, though.
Two quick points, though, if I can.
Yes, please.
Like, one, it's just interesting to hear what you're saying, and it's like one of Pat's favorite mantras. Keep the main thing the main thing. It's all about winning, and yet this team was absolutely not about winning. And I think a big part of that was the Jimmy distraction. But secondly, you seem really surprised and almost like just shocked at that Miami didn't put up any kind of effort in game 4.
I was shocked. I had multiple conversations with multiple people before the game. No, probably not going to win, but I would be very surprised if they lost by 40 again. And we were right. They lost by 55. And so, yeah, I'm just, this is not the Heat. They don't lose like this 2 games in a row. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised, because the talent deficit just is what it is. But the talent deficit isn't losing. It's not so bad that you should lose by almost 100 points over 2 games.
Yeah.
It's not that bad. I mean, they looked like a G League team out there. And this is a team with Bam and Tyler and Erik Spoelstra. There's talent on that roster. Not as much as Cleveland. They should not have won this game. Everybody knew that they weren't going to win this series. Like, come on. But yeah, I'm honestly surprised by how quickly they gave up. It was, you nailed it. 3 turnovers in the first 3 minutes, or it was 3 turnovers in the first 2 minutes. And then that was it. Like Tyler Herro hit 1 3 to go up 3-2. And that was Miami's only lead of the game. Cleveland went on a 13-2 run, or a 12-3 run rather, to open the game, and it just got worse. And the Heat gave up, and being there at the arena and watching the body language, indifferent, not caring, just sort of understanding that it was over, broken, and no reason to fight. And by the way, I don't know that I necessarily even blame them.
Yeah, same.
But at the same time, this is not what we're accustomed to. And it was the one thing that you can hold your hat. It was the whole Heat culture thing. And that's why I said, it was sort of a joke, but I mean it. You better not come out next year in Heat culture jerseys. That better not happen. Whatever you got, I don't know if it's the plan or not, but if it is the plan, whatever you got to do to get out of it and audible, you better do it. Because you are going to be a laughing stock if you come out in Heat culture jerseys next year. That cannot happen. That cannot happen. Is there anything that the Heat could have done differently this season to avoid this, or somehow? And I don't even mean like what could they have done differently to win a championship or even compete, but like what could they have done differently in the grand scheme of things, do you think?
I don't think they could have done anything differently. Like I think there's one thing that they absolutely botched or mismanaged, and that's handling the Jimmy Butler situation. You've said it before, and I guess I was naive in thinking that you could go into the season and things would remain mostly copacetic or professional, and clearly that didn't work out that way. Yeah. I thought his emotions wouldn't be a problem. I thought he was going to just be content with getting paid this season and look to move on in the offseason and be as competitive as ever. But I guess you need to get paid a lot of money in order to be competitive, as competitive and as good as Jimmy Butler has been. So that I think is the biggest thing that they could have done differently, and really the only thing, because after that you can't look at what they could have done at the trade deadline. There were no options. They traded Jimmy, and that was their big move, and that was really their only move. Yeah. Aside from that, what are they going to do to shore up this roster? They're stuck with who they have, and maybe you could look at some minor things here and there. Why the hell did Erik Spoelstra play? I was going to say Dion Waiters, but it was Terry Rozier. Why did he play Terry Rozier so much?
Well, that was my main thing. Was I had three things. The Jimmy Butler situation, we know. Okay, we don't even have to get into that, but they messed it up. I think realized that Terry Rozier just wasn't helping. About a month before they benched him, you had to give him at least a chance. The first couple months, about a month before you benched him, does that save you a couple of wins? Maybe. Does it materially change the outcome of Miami's season? No. Maybe you could have developed a different offense that wasn't 5-out. Remember, go back all the way to training camp, the 5-out offense, all of that ended up not working. But I don't even know if I blame Spo for that, because last year's offense wasn't working either. So basically, I came down to this. Could they have done anything differently? Sure. Would it have materially changed the season? Absolutely not. You and I debated rotation changes all year. We get a million questions. Should they have been playing Kel'el Ware earlier in the season? You and I know more about what was going on with Ware. Not to say that anything bad was happening, but he was a rookie. Like, talking with people after the game, I think even Erik Spoelstra said this publicly, seeing where Kel'el Ware is now versus where he was at the start of the year when everybody was saying you should have just started him. He said, I never thought in a million years that he would have been starting playoff games. And he didn't play well in this series, but he did start these playoff games.
By Allen. I think everybody see that. Like, as good as he's improved, think about that. Like, if they had played him at the beginning of the year, he wouldn't have been any better. But he certainly wasn't playable, and he wasn't even playable against Jared Allen. So.
No. Ultimately, the roster just wasn't good enough. They returned mostly the same group after basically the same thing happened in the playoffs last year. Like, that was the original sin, is you just came back with the same team. And I don't know. Was it worth making the playoffs? We'll talk about that and why some fans think that the Heat should do the one thing that they never do this offseason. We'll talk about that now here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Wayfair. Spring is here, and that means it's home project season. Whether you're refreshing a room or tackling a full renovation, Wayfair is the best kept secret for all things home improvement, from small updates like a stylish cabinet hardware maybe, or some major upgrades like new vanities, sinks, outdoor lighting, whatever you're looking for. Wayfair has it, and they have quality products for every budget. You can upgrade your kitchen, your bathroom, your living room, and with Wayfair, the selection is incredible. What's that?
The roster? Can you upgrade your roster?
You cannot upgrade the roster at Wayfair. It's the one thing they don't offer. But if they did, it would be free. Fast shipping would be available on anything you try to get. to upgrade this roster.
Nice pivot.
They have top brands like GE and Moen at great prices. Shopping is seamless. You'll find exactly what you're looking for. I used their website in the past, and believe me, I needed to upgrade a couple things around the house. It's very easy to use, and you'll get things at a great price. So make home improvement easy with Wayfair. Get started now at wayfair.com. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. We are still rocking for 5 days a week. Off-season content. You're not going to want to miss it. We're going to dive into the off-season, the draft, free agents, star trades, everything you've come to know and love about Locked On Heat. Let's get to some listener questions, though, to end today's show. Thanks to everybody who sent in these questions via the Locked On Heat Insider community on Subtext. You can find the link to join that in the show notes. You're going to want to join that for everything that's going to happen this offseason. But Andrew writes in, was making the playoffs worth this? And we know, the thing with the draft picks, right? If they had dropped out of the playoffs, they keep their lottery pick. Maybe they have a chance to move up in this draft. There's a clear, top of this draft with some star power in it. That said, if they had kept their pick this year, that would have been in the lottery. They would have lost their unprotected pick next year and lost an unprotected pick in 2028. So I know that the Heat internally were motivated to make the playoffs because they wanted to avoid the risk of those unprotected picks coming off the books. But, at the same time, I think it's fair to wonder, was making the playoffs worth this? David, what do you think?
It's unfair to kind of try to answer that question right now because we're not just standing near the body. We're standing in perhaps the most gruesome crime scene ever in NBA history. Like, this isn't just, there's a dead person over in the corner. This is like gore to the max here is what we're seeing. This was a completely eviscerated corpse of the Heat season. And so to look at it that way and what happened over the last couple of games, yeah, clearly it doesn't matter, right? But if this had been 4 competitive games or maybe 5 or 6 competitive games, maybe if Miami had played the way that maybe naively you thought that they could, I don't think anybody would question whether or not making the playoffs was worth it.
Would
now,
it have been
clearly.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Would it have been better if you're in Atlanta, you force overtime, and Davion Mitchell doesn't make 3 3-pointers in overtime, and you lose in Atlanta, and your season's over then? Would you have felt better from a pride perspective then than just making the playoffs and losing this way?
No, because I think, I really do think there's a silver lining to the darkest of clouds. It's that this beatdown, this complete and total evisceration really underscores, and not underscores, what am I talking about? It puts it up on marquee lighting the size of the Freedom Tower. This team stinks and needs to be completely just overhauled.
I agree. And it almost, you could argue, is the best case scenario to have lost like this to the number 1 seed, because there's no hiding. There's no ambiguity here. It's not a couple of bounces go our way and maybe we're playing the next team in the second round. No. There's no bounces. There's nothing that could have happened. Like, you are this far away. And on top of getting eviscerated by Boston last year and then getting eviscerated by Cleveland this year, you're like, okay, it's not just one team we have to contend with. It's 2 teams. And it's more than that. And by the way, the Orlando Magic have won the Southeast Division 2 years in a row. You're not even the best team in your own state. And we've got a 2-year sample size to prove it. And they're getting better and you're getting worse. And you could argue it's the best case. It is the best way to make the playoffs. You could talk yourself into some of that false, irrational hope, whatever, and then you just get your doors blown off by a far superior team. Like, there is no ambiguity with it. It is, you're not even close. You got to make some changes. Adam writes in, what happened this series? They got beat. I don't know what else to say. There's nothing that I don't think that there's. I will say Game 2 is the one that got away.
Yeah.
That was the one. That's Game 2. Spo at his finest. He outcoached Kenny Atkinson. The effort was there, and then Donovan Mitchell was just like, nope, you're not going to get the game that you got in Boston last year. I'm taking this one back.
Right.
Maybe it's a gentlemanly sweep at that point, but that's really the only difference.
Yeah, I mean, like, every possible advantage that Miami might have come up with. Again, the competitive spirit, what happened in game 2. Like, you think that a team goes on the road. That's why I'm picking Cleveland, like even over Oklahoma City, as good as the Thunder have been. And maybe I'm crazy for doing so, but like they went into Miami and there was no distractions, no taking their foot off the gas. In fact, if anything, they were like, no, we're not content with 150 miles per hour. We want to push for 2.
Blood
and that's
in the
exactly
water.
what they did.
Yep.
Yeah. They really just went into Miami and were like, nope, we're single-minded in our pursuit and our focus. They were without Darius Garland, who you could argue is as good as the best player in Miami's roster, and they beat them by 80-something effing points. Like, I mean, this is ridiculous. If this had been without Tyler Herro, and basically Game 3 was effectively without Tyler, like, this is what shows you what Miami's roster is. And Cleveland was like, nah, we're okay.
They're
We've
deeper,
got
they're better.
all-stars hanging off trees here. We don't mind. We'll just go ahead and
play
fuck
Dean
another.
Wade for 2 games, and they're like, oh, here's this guy who's great.
And he was
like,
great.
He's a really good role player. Yep.
DeAndre Hunter looked like a star out there.
Sam Merrill came in and started for Darius Garland, and they were like, what's the difference? This guy can shoot. He's competitive defensively, you know?
He's cool.
Tiffany writes in, do you know how Bam feels about Tyler Herro's comments about Jimmy? So, Dave, we're kind of running up against our clock here, but I wanted to at least touch on this because I only want to do it now and I don't ever want to talk about this again. But this quote from the Athletic story, they talked exclusive interview with Tyler Herro, and this quote got aggregated, and here it is. Quote, obviously I know I need Jimmy to win. If we had Jimmy right now, I feel like it would be a completely different situation. We probably wouldn't even be the 8th seed. So finding that middle balance of like, dang, we need him, but also understanding bleep, that's his career and what he wants is ultimately his right to want what he wants. It was just tough to be in the middle of both sides, end quote. The thing that got aggregated from this is, I know I need Jimmy to win. And the aggregators did what the aggregators do, and they had a ball with it. Sure. They even aggregated a bunch of stuff, but they really focused on that. And I think that was, I think it was taking it out of context.
A little.
And I think, and I spoke with the reporter who wrote this at the game, and I was just like, what happened there? And he said that is not at all what Tyler meant. And he used Jimmy's name. He was sort of talking in present tense, which was not really his intent, but you can't really change the words of the quote because that's not exactly,
Reporting.
Kosher. So, he even was a little nervous. I shouldn't say too much because I don't know how much he wants to share, but he wasn't happy with how it got aggregated, the writer, and nor was Tyler. And so I understand it, but I also wouldn't. That's why I don't even want to put that much focus on it because I think it's kind of a nothing.
Yes.
And the aggregating sites will have fun with it for a few hours, and then nobody will ever think about this again.
Yeah, I'm just, again, this is my thoughts on it. I don't think he said anything that was all that surprising either. Like, yeah, as an athlete, you never really want to hear the star athlete on your team say, well, we need this other guy, especially one that you just traded a few months ago. But at the same time, he's not entirely wrong. And I don't think Bam would take it personally either. I don't really think it makes that much of a difference to answer the question. I don't think Bam is listening to this and going, damn, you really threw me under the bus. It's like, why wouldn't you want to have the multi-time all-star who's shown the capacity to raise his game to incredible levels in playoff situations? You do want that guy. You do want him to win. Do you need him? Maybe that wasn't the right word for Tyler to choose, but it's also clear, and I think this series really proved it, that you're lacking that superstar. So I don't think Bam would take much from it.
We have like 20 seconds to answer this last one. I had writes in, is it time for a full rebuild? Was that part of the thinking of getting into the playoffs? Get those lottery protected draft picks back. I'm going to just say, and this is maybe more of a tease of what we're going to talk about throughout the week and months and everything like that. No, I don't think it's time for a full rebuild. David, what about you?
Right now I'm like in the murder scene and I'm just thinking to myself, I never want to see the color red ever again. So yes, but I can understand the idea that maybe you can't totally rebuild it either. I also think if you can acquire a superstar and a real true superstar, then everybody should be on the table.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night until an NBA champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NBA Game Night on Locked On NBA on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts.